How do we do that?
Because they are in the Tiger Grant applications, and those Tiger Grant funds would be listed as the funding. And I think Federal Transit Administration would, as long as there's a good chance that those funds could become available, they would. If you get rejected, then they have to come out of the plan.
Oh, I see.
Just an education maybe on the 2034 long-range transportation plan. If we adopt that in the summer of 2011, when does it actually become our long-range plan? It's got to get approved.
We think January 2012. It'll have to go through, Mr. Smith. It'll have to go through the air quality conformity analysis. It'll have to go then through the state and federal review process. That's traditionally how long it takes to do those 2 or 3 things.
It's 6 months, give or take.
Give or take. So January 2012, but I think a lot of folks thought 2012 is when we have to act. You have to have acted and had agreement by the summer of 2011. That's fast tracking for something of this magnitude.
Mr. Farmer, for informational purposes only, what is the best case scenario payoff in terms of the grant funds?
All of those funds, all of those projects get approved for Tiger Grant applications. That'd be best case. That would be.
Is that much money available nationwide?
I think there's a good chance most of these could very well get funding. And I personally think some of these are very strong on the national scene.
Or anybody else? Yes, Mr. Harold.
Chair, I just want to say, while there's background out there, I want to try to be known the chief administrative officers who were part of this discussion, so everybody's a little quiet.
You've talked about it already. That's right.
For 5 hours.
Mr. Tuttle.
Yes, Dwight, in addition to the Tiger projects, were there not 2 of the major 6 projects that have to come out because they're no longer financially supported, that were substantially financially supported due to tolls, both 64 on the Peninsula widening and the Midtown Tunnel? So those are still in the 2030, correct?
Well, I think, and I remember that conversation vividly, Mr. Tuttle. I think it's more accurate to say that in the context of developing the financial feasibility component of the 2034, we will confirm that those revenue streams would in fact support those. So I'd have to say, in all fairness, today, literally today, they would not be there.
So
but I think half of those projects could easily come back as toll-supported projects. But this body would have to decide if the tolling and that the toll rates proposed to make them financially feasible are acceptable for this board to approve in 2030.
So you're saying everything comes out in 2030, but then it's back on the table for the 2030?
Absolutely. That's correct. That's accurate.
Okay.
All right.
If you don't mind. Madam Chair, just to be clear, the Navy Station offered transit extension, beginning of these transit extension projects, actually funded through the FDA 5309 New Starts program and not through the capital grant application.
All right. Thank you. Yes, sir. Mr. Rucker, did you
What were the original 6 projects that were funded?
Third Crossing, Midtown Tunnel, 64 on the Peninsula, 64 on the South Side, Southeastern Parkway, and 460.
Those projects are still in the out.
According to your letter.
Well, has the MPO taken a formal action to amend, because the definition of amendment is an addition or the deletion of a project? Has the MPO taken formal action to remove those 6 projects? Today,
the recommended action would be those HRTA projects officially fall out of the 2030 plan. These projects come back into the 2030 plan, and that the dual recommendation from TAC is that we expedite 2034, where I'd have to tell you some of those HRTA projects and others will come back to the long-range plan.
And there will be, I guess, once approved, a redetermination of fiscal constraint, identifying the estimated costs as well as the proposed revenue sources for
these projects.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Mayor Frank.
Help me, Dwight. Coming into this meeting, I mean, I was all in favor of this, but I understood the Midtown Tunnel was still in the plan.
The Midtown Tunnel, I think, is, Committee help with this, is in right now is in the plan, and I guess Paul, we probably do need to take that one separately. Right now, you have a fully funded private sector partnership proposal that fully funds it, so it does meet the criteria, I believe, today with that. But I believe, and excuse me, I did err on that. That is the only project of the HRTA projects that have documented the financial feasibility. So you are correct, and I'm glad you brought that
Well,
up.
my question, Mr. Farmer, would be, rather than voting to remove things from the plan and adding things to the plan, and we can add these things to the plan, but by virtue of the letter that we received from the Federal Highway Administration, the other things either fall or fall out, and they either meet the criteria or they don't. You know, whether or not there's funding for these other projects, we believe we have funding for the Midtown Tunnel, so we think it stays in, but shouldn't that be by operation of the letter? I don't think, why should we vote today to remove things from the plan? Why don't we just vote to amend it and add things, and then there'd be a determination made whether or not the things fall out by
I'd have
virtue
to
of the letter?
defer to Mr. Rucker as to whether we can still maintain the frozen status unless we provide you with a formal letter indicating that we have sufficient documentation. For example, the Midtown Tunnel is financially feasible, and you can unfreeze the Midtown Tunnel.
I'm suggesting that we just amend to add these things, and then the Highway Administration can determine, or we can, however it gets determined, whether or not it meets the criteria in the letter. But why would we vote to remove things from the plan unless we have to?
Well, the letter said that if you amended to add, because of the ruling of the Supreme Court, they have consternation about the taxes and fees that were associated with the HRTA project. So help me out here, Ivan. I think your letter said that if you add other projects, let's say you add a Lesnar Bridge or you add something else, that action requires you to take some sort of proactive position on the HRTA project.
Right.
So I don't think you can just ignore the HRTA projects here. If FHWA says we can do that, I'm good with that. That's kind of a win-win, and it doesn't really force our hand on HRTA. But Ivan, I don't want to speak for you here.
Well, I mean, it's certainly a redetermination of fiscal constraint. Our hope is that the board will review the 6 projects and make a determination of, of what can be funded and what can't be funded for those projects that can't be funded. Again, an amendment includes an addition of or deletion of a project. Formally remove those projects from the plan.
I just want to make it clear, Madam Chair, I don't think within 30 days, if this snowball gets bigger, that staff can come back and do remotely the kind of rigorous financial analysis on all 6 of those projects to come back to you, say, in January and say they're all good, or that 3 or 4 are good. I don't want to stage ourselves up for that, for lack of a better phrase, a food fight on that particular one in 30 days. Given enough time, staff could, or with other resources, do the rigorous kind of work that I think these folks would be looking for to say it's still good to leave them in there. And I was thinking that we would do most all of those, except for the Midtown Tunnel through this 2034 process. I think I'm being very honest here in telling you that's really the way this is going to have to go down to meet this expedited requirement, and not do anything harmful unnecessarily for the other 6. But I think clearly the millions of dollars worth of work on the table with Midtown Tunnel make it clearly financially feasible. We've not done that kind of work on any of the other projects that I'm aware of.
All right. Anybody else?
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir,
I'm
Mr. Smith.
confused all day. I'm not exactly sure what the action today does. Does the action today start a process, or does it actually say these are in, these other things are out, and now it's finished?
No, I think that for 2030, the 6 are out except for Midtown Tunnel. Those other 5 or 6, because we have HRBT up there clearly from TAC, would be in the 2034 discussion, and you should have resolution on those other 5 or 6 for 2034 in the next 18 months. But for today, these projects go back in.
These
for
go
2030.
in, Midtown Tunnel stays in. The other
Stays
5
in, and the other 5 come out.
All right. I'm okay.
Okay.
Earlier in this meeting, when we voted to go before the Transportation Board and ask for additional money to be put back in, one of the things we asked for was for the widening of I-64 and study score. If that's pulled out of this plan, then what happens?
That's an environmental document, Mayor Zotto. You can do environmental work unless Dennis or somebody else, Eric is in the back here, can correct me, I think you can do, or Ivan, you can confirm, you can do environmental work without a project being in the plan. You can't move into design right away construction, but you can certainly do and complete an environmental document without a project being in the plan.
All right, Mr. Oliver?
Dwight, yesterday I thought I heard you say that maybe Dominion Boulevard would stay. Okay, so that is on the list.
Yes.
You also said something about I-64 widening
might make it into the 2034 as fully financially feasible based on the preliminary work we did in 2005. I still make that call on the 64 widening. But that's still predicated on tolling an interstate roadway, which Congress currently doesn't allow unless they get special approval.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
At the risk of sounding like a one-road legislator, couldn't the feasibility for the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel be included in this 2030 plan?
We have, have traditionally, not to say we can, traditionally not included feasibility studies or planning studies in a long-range plan. I don't know that FHWA would object to that, but we normally have not. We have just done them.
To that extent, to that statement, the fact that we haven't done it traditionally, looking back over the course of my lifetime, the way we've done roads, maybe this is the time we started doing things a little untraditionally, and we started sending clear and strong messages to the community about we're serious about daily choke points. And I'm going all the way back to the transportation referendum, you know, where it failed for many reasons. But people told me one of their reasons was the fact that the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel wasn't even included in the list of projects. I mean, what a great opportunity to include the feasibility of the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel in this list of projects, especially if you're telling me that the Highway Administration wouldn't oppose that.
Generally, they have been done, Madam Chair, as part of the official HRTPO approved Unified Planning Work Program. Feasibility study. I don't want to get bureaucratic on you here, because you could, in the plan, show feasibility studies, and we can do that. Are we prepared to list all of those that we might want to do for 2030 feasibility studies today? I'm afraid we're not prepared for that today to have a legitimate discussion. For 2034, if that's the way this organization wants to go, I'm fully behind you on that. For 2034.
I just want to correct one part of the discussion here previously with Delegate Oder. We can do environmental work, but we cannot get a record of decisions from Federal Highway if the project is not in the long range. That's correct.
All right, Ms. Frank.
Just, the recommendation is to review the Hampton Roads water crossings, including the HRBT. That is within what we're being asked to approve here. Now, you want to go further on a feasibility, and just in all, honesty, I don't know if you're talking about 2 lanes, 4 lanes, bridge. How can you conduct a feasibility on something that hasn't begun to be even, that you couldn't even pencil out right now? I asked Dwight last time when we had this discussion about the computer, what does the computer think the HRBT is? And he couldn't tell me. How you could put feasibility, it's 4 lanes, I was told yesterday it was 4 lanes. But how you could do the feasibility without some agreement around here what it even looks like.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir. Sure.
As an architect and a designer, I think what you're talking about is starting, where you start is feasibility and schematics. And so I don't know how in the world we could even begin to talk about whether it's 2 lanes or 4 lanes unless you do a feasibility study.
Well, I thought the VDOT just did that for us. Did they do a, well, I don't know what, I'm not going to bog it down with it.
Yeah, because I think that what we're approving, we can talk about that when we go over, I mean, all we're doing is approving acceleration of the adoption of the plan to include review of these things. We can discuss the HRBT and what that means later, right? Right now, we just need to do this motion to amend the 2030
plan. The second half
plan.
of this, as you can tell, is going to be a very complex and stressful discussion. The first part, I think, is take care of housekeeping.
Right, exactly. So what we need to do is approve an expedited amendment to the 2030 plan to include those things listed plus the Midtown Tunnel.
Yes.
But I'm real concerned, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Gibson.
I'm very concerned if we're taking out the 64 project with this action, then if we do get money set aside to do the EIS study, we can't get a record of decision now on that project. Or is there a possible way that 64 can be considered fiscally constrained and leave it in there?
I think that's what Mr. Oliver was asking.
Yeah, I don't think we've heard the answer to that yet, have we?
Madam Chair, the environmental process, I'm going to guesstimate, to get to where you'd be ready to do a record of, the CTP would be ready to do a record of decision. Ray's done several of these. You're probably a year or two away at least before you'll be asking CTB for a record of decision. So there's a lot of work that has to be done, part of that environmental document, just like for high-speed rail, before you get to a ROD, a record of decision. So the 2034 plan process works nicely to be ready to have those good discussions about whether it's in or out.
Okay.
Mayor Johnson.
I think what we're trying to do today is get these projects in the top there in case they get the Tiger money or whatever funds they're for, that we can go ahead and accept that and work toward it. We know we have the money for the Midtown, and all the rest of it is going to be studied, as I understand it, starting this summer. So I would make a motion that we do exactly what is on that screen and that we move forward, and also including the Midtown tunnel.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion.
Second.
We have a second from Mayor Frame. Do we need to take a, do you think we're going to need to do an individualized vote here? Or?
I'd like some discussion.
Yes, sir.
You know, everything within me wants to make an amendment to the motion to include the feasibility of the Hampton Roads Bridge tunnel. It's with fear and trepidation that I would make that motion, because I don't want to divide this group and suddenly have a plethora of amendments that start falling down here saying they want their road included and their road included and so forth. But it just goes without saying that if we don't begin to address and study the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, we're never going to get there. And if we don't begin to study it, and if we don't make some demonstrated public step towards improving the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, the public is never going to believe us. And so, I'm prepared to vote no, just so that I can explain to people that I feel like that's my public statement, that we need to do more. I'm prepared to make the motion that we just include the feasibility. I just am so new to this process, I don't want to step on people's toes, and I certainly don't want to upset the apple cart. It's vitally important that these projects be included so they become eligible for Tiger grants. But my emotions on this are very wrong. After having just gone through, the last 8 years of my legislative career, culminated by this recent election, the public wants to see a demonstrated action on the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that something that could be discussed in the development of the Unified Planning Work Program? That feasibility study, to actually have that incorporated in the development of your next?
Normally, Madam Chair, a feasibility study is normally done historically in Hampton Roads, traditionally in the Unified Planning Work Program, and then when you come to an agreement to move the project forward to the implementation stage, design, right-of-way construction, then it goes into the long-range, fiscally constrained long-range transportation plan. Not to say we can't do something different, but that's traditionally the way it's been done, based on federal regulations.
What are the problems with Delegate Oder's suggestion that we add a feasibility study?
My honest opinion, while I understand fully where the delegate is coming from, you will open up Pandora's box beyond your wildest imagination. We could do that literally on 20 or 30 projects. And I have witnessed firsthand, when we've done analysis, that you could, if you get too carried away with this, spend a disproportionate amount of your precious implementation dollars on feasibility work, and you will literally give up implementing some projects because you have spent those kind of resources doing feasibility study on way too many projects. So I think we should finish our prioritization process, get a clear definition that That project has great utility, it is financially feasible, and has good economic potential, and if those answers are all positive, then I think we move full speed ahead on an implementation. If not, then you'll have to pause and decide what you want to do on this 2034. So I think you'll get the answers to all of that, and you will get them in due course and not jeopardize any of the work that's about to be done.
Mr. Smith?
Item 14 is the UPWP. And last spring we talked about really having a lot more early conversation about what is effectively, I think, sort of your work plan. And I think that's part of why it's on the agenda today. And I sort of have watched Mr. Rucker nod, as Dwight has said, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, I'll let you say it, but that, yeah, having the feasibility study in the UPWP does what we need to do. If that's true, then I'd like to have that conversation under item 14 and try to accommodate his needs. Delegate Oder and I frankly argue and disagree over, the projects and whatnot, but I appreciate his desire to make sure that this thing gets the kind of attention and discussion that it needs. If it can happen, and I've just got to defer to staff. If it can happen at the UPWP level, I think that's what we do. But I need everybody to kind of nod and say that, yeah, that can happen.
Well, on your last slide, you actually suggested we have two motions. One, to approve the amendment to the 2030 plan, and then second, to endorse an expedited
I think that second, I don't want to speak completely to the TAC members, and particularly for the chair, Ms. Cuffy Glenn, or as William said earlier, but I think the second part was to help you folks understand how they came to this expedited recommendation, to let you know we're not letting the other things fall off the table.
But maybe it would give Delegate Oder some comfort if we did it. We had two motions. We had one where we amend the 2030 plan, and then second where we approve an expedited 2034 process that it's going to include all the water crossings.
I think item 14.
Well, the problem with the sort of putting it in 2034 is year 2012 before it's accepted and adopted and whatnot. So I think that's the challenge with that half. But again, the UPWP may get us there. I don't know enough about the technical way these different documents relate to each other.
All right, anybody else? Yes, sir.
Earlier in this meeting, we were railing against the fact that we were pushing funding out in the out years, and that would possibly not be there. Now we're perfectly content to put projects out in the out years that may not be there. I share Delegate Oder's concerns about the Hampton Road Tunnel. I'm also very concerned about the widening of 64 on the peninsula, which Mr. Hewer says if it falls off, that may be a problem. I just think we're sending the wrong message. Once again, we've got an opportunity to say what we want, where we want it, and we ought to do it here.
Madam Chair, let me clarify one specific statement. Senator Miller, I don't think Mr. Hewer said doing the NEPA document would be jeopardized by not having a long-range plan. I think what he said was when you complete that NEPA document and you're ready for the CTB to take action on a record of decision, at that point it has to be in. I think Dennis helped that, okay, and that could very well mesh up nicely with the 2034 process of summer of 2011. If we were fortunate enough to get the CTB to reinstate those monies for the NEPA document.
The risk of, I understand what's going on about the HRTPO, but we don't know what we're proposing to build yet. So by putting in an HRTPO project into the constrained long-range plan, when you haven't defined the scope of work of what that is yet, is very risky. So compromise may be to address that under your unified work plan to get some scope of work defined.
Right. And that's what
define the project.
That's actually required. That's a requirement for the federal requirement of the UPWP. You know, who's going to pay for it, the scope, schedule for completion.
What is it?
And what is it? And all of that.
Because we say HRTPO, are we just building tubes? Are we building approaches? Are we building a bridge? What are we building?
I mean, you can put one section in the UPWP. You can put that as an information item in the long-range transportation plan, but ultimately that should be in the UPWP.
Madam Chair,
yes, sir.
Just to bring it close to the discussion, now what I was asking for was a feasibility study. I wasn't saying put in the project, but I think that for the point of discussion, rather than call for the question, I just would let everybody know that I'm satisfied to move this to agenda item number 14 And while we have spent almost 2 hours here today, I will tell you there are constituents who spent that much time in the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel this morning.
Including many of us here, even though I may not be your constituent. All right, so we have a motion and a second.
And this is, the motion is slide 7, right?
The motion is slide 7.
That's all that's in the motion.
As printed.
Slide 7.
Well,
Plus the Midtown Tunnel.
Midtown Tunnel.
Well, no, we're not moving to remove anything from the plan on this motion that I see.
Well, as I understand it, they fall off.
Well, but that's not the motion I hear. The motion I hear is to add these items.
Which is the
correct?
very question I had of Mr. Farmer, is what, do we have to vote to remove things, or do we just vote to add things?
I want to deflect this, but I want to ask Mr. Rucker, can we have 5 of the 6 projects remain frozen, leave the Midtown Tunnel in, and then add these projects?
That's tough. That's tough. I mean, if you do that, I mean, just think about what you're doing. You basically still have a plan that's not financially constrained. And what it's going to do is it's going to put it's going to put the chairman of the MPO, the state DOT, and also me, as a federal representative, in a very uncomfortable position. Because, for example, your tip, when you submit that transportation improvement program to Federal Highway, which is the document that authorizes the release of federal funds for projects. Along with that goes the certification statement, where the chairman and the VDOT basically sign on the dotted line stating that, among other things, the long-range transportation plan is financially constrained. I don't know if you would be comfortable with signing on that dotted line as a condition of receiving federal funds, saying that the long-range transportation plan is financially constrained, by knowing that it's not. So my suggestion is, again, an amendment as defined in the regulations includes, among other things, the addition or the deletion of projects. So my suggestion is to make a formal action to remove an amendment, an expedited amendment, just like you're expediting to add projects, let's make an expedited amendment to pull out projects.
With the caveat that those projects will be fully addressed for 2034 by summer of 2011 by action of this board.
Mr. Goodson.
So, I have an additional question. So you have a project like 64 that could be funded with tolls. Now, we don't know if the tolls are available, but we know they're a possibility. These projects, we don't know if the Tiger grants are going to be available, but it's a possibility.
Right.
What's the difference? Help me with that.
Well,
We'll know in 30 days.
Yeah.
we certainly will.
Well,
Again,
Congress should act and allow tolls in 30 days. We don't know that.
Well, we all look at the issue of, is it reasonable? And I think in the letter, we provide instances of what is considered to be reasonable and what is considered to be not reasonable. If you consider the tolling on a portion of the interstate, in your opinion, to be reasonable, and if the state is concurring with that, and I think that's enough for us.
Yeah, Madam Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I just...
I kind of batted a little bit to Dwight. Your toll studies that we've done in the region, I don't think any of them say all of the project can be 100% funded by tolls. The only one that we have before us that is 100% funded as proposed by tolls is the Midtown Tunnel. And the community is saying that the proposed tolls are too high. So therefore, to address your question, I don't think we can, as a body, say that 64 can be built solely on tolls. There's got to be other combinations of revenue there's a public and a private partnership in all of these constructions that we're talking about. There's two pots of money. So to say one pot of money is going to fund everything goes to Mr. Rucker's comment of, is it really reasonable and is it really physically constrained? And I think that's something that needs to be considered as we move this forward.
Well, and I think that what Mayor Johnson said was that if the projects aren't funded, then they fall off.
We will, if they are not, then they will have to be removed from the plan.
So Mr. Goodson's point is why couldn't we take the same position with the 64 widening?
Well, the key word from Mr. Rucker was reasonable from the get-go. Without speaking for him, I think what Ivan is saying is FHWA on a Tiger Grant application pending sees that as reasonable. Congress taking action in this particular example to allow tolling on an interstate roadway would probably be tough for them to look the other way and say, yeah, that's reasonable. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think that's where we cross the line. I think they're giving us a lot of leeway on the Tiger grant application because they are pending within 30 to 60 days. But again, you put me in a situation where I'm trying to argue for the federal regulations, and that's very awkward for me.
Yes, sir. We have a motion and a second on the slide that Ms. Johnson has provided, including the Midtown Tunnel. All right.
Is it connected to item 14?
And, yes,
Can I
ma'am.
give a motion? I'm confused.
All right.
I've heard so many different things. I just want to know what I'm going to vote on at this moment.
You want to explain your motion?
The motion that I have is to approve an expedited amendment, including the projects that are eligible for a Tiger grant or whatever. Can we put on the screen? So
We're doing that. We're going to do that right now.
All right, and with the understanding that, can we get it to add item number 14 for Delegate Odor?
Well, that's going to be addressed.
We'll just deal with that.
Yeah, I think that's a good place for that. And I just like to say, I think we get into all this, and I agree with you, sir, that the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel needs something. There's no doubt about it. We need a lot to do that. We all know we need all of these things, but we've got to move forward. And what we have is up here today, a chance to get these things. We may not get them, and if we don't, they go away. But let's not lose the opportunity to get some funds if we can. Midtown Tunnel, we know we've got it. We'll know we've got it when we get it, but we're there. So let's just take what we have and hope we get some of this. And then this second piece is to approve the acceleration of the adoption of the 2034, where we get to discuss all of these things and we look at all of these pieces and look at these crossings. So I think we're just looking for a real narrow scope here of let's go after what we can get. So that's the motion. The motion is as it sits up there, and also including the Midtown Tunnel. So you'd be removing the Hampton Roads Transportation Authority projects out of this that are not funded at this time.
That's your motion. And
Maybe I'm wrong.
No,
It's fiscally restrained and funded. Is that not the point here? Because like I said, these top ones will go away if the money doesn't come.
Correct.
All right, yes, all right, so we got a motion and a second.
That is the motion.
And here's the motion, Senator Miller, it's up, what is going up right now. All right?
I'd like to state I'm going to vote against the motion because of the item that was just added. I still don't believe that the 64 project needs to be removed.
I will do a roll call when you're ready to vote.
All right, I think we're ready to vote.
Okay.
Why
Yes,
can't you restate the projects for the
We have them on the screen here. The motion is from Mayor Johnson is to approve an expedited amendment to the 2030 long-range transportation plan to include Lesnar Bridge, Route 58, and Suffolk Naval Station, Norfolk Transit Extension, I-564 Intermodal Connector, Virginia Beach Transit, Light Rail Transit Extension, High-Speed Rail, Dominion Boulevard, Midtown Tunnel, MLK Extension, and removing 5 of the 6 projects, meaning the one that remains is the Midtown Tunnel. There is a caveat here that we would be considering the other 5 in the UPWP and in the long range, in the 2034 plan, and we would be adding HRTPO feasibility study in the 2011 UPWP.
Madam Chair, and why could you restate the 5 of the 6 projects?
I-64 widening on the peninsula, I-64 high-rise bridge to Bowers Hill, Route 460, Southeastern Parkway, and what did I leave out? Third crossing, sorry.
Yes, Mayor Frame.
The third bullet, add HR feasibility study, isn't that going to open up the Pandora's box that you were talking about?
Honestly, that's a
Doesn't need to be in
UPWP
the
action.
motion.
That's a UPWP action for me.
It'll come up in 14.
That'll come up in 14.
I think we take that out,
So I think the point is that it's not part of the motion.
It's not part of the motion, no. It'll be item 14.
The UPWP item, Camilla, comes out.
Mr. McReynolds has a question.
Does the high-speed rail include enhanced rail on this peninsula?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, see?
Per action of the board on October 30th, that position. And again, that's pending consideration. That's coming in the very, very near future, I think by the CTB in March timeframe, I think, Dennis. I know you're getting late for your meeting.
Well, let me ask you this, because Delegate Oder just said he liked the sentence we just took out. Does it hurt anything to leave that in there?
To leave what in?
The suggestion about the
We're on
agenda item number 14.
I really need to keep it clean. We're on a 2030 long-range plan amendment.
And not the.
I recommend you not have all these caveats, but part of those from the TAC was so that you understood why they had the expedited amendment. As far as I'm concerned, 2034 is a separate process. It's sort of like a letter of intent. UPWPs are like a letter of intent. If you really want to keep it clean, I recommend they come off and you just say exactly what we're talking about for 2030. That's really the question on the table.
All right, let's go ahead and take the roll.
You want to just stick with the 2030 amendment then? Amendment materials, period, for this particular action?
No, Mayor Johnson's
we were approving the
resolution includes
acceleration
approve
as well.
acceleration.
Is that what you're?
That's 2034. If you want to put those two together,
What is your recommendation?
my recommendation is you deal with 2030 first.
All right,
Can we do
then-
two separate motions
Then
then?
just leave the first two bullets. and we'll come
To keep it clean, if there's, because, you know, fixing it so everybody can say yes at
I
one
think,
time.
can we do,
2030.
let's do two different
I'll amend the
motions.
motion. We have two motions.
Right.
We're going to leave, Mike, just the 2030 items in, the 2034s,
And-
UPWPs.
Mayor Johnson's now is making two separate motions. Did you second those two separate motions?
Sure.
Okay, I'm just trying to get it done. All right, let's go ahead and do the roll call.
All right, Mike, and I'm going to have the roll call
And
item
this
up.
motion includes removing the 5 projects. This motion we're voting on.
Yes, the first one.
Okay.
We need the roll call. Mayor Krasnoff.
Yes.
Christian Riley.
No.
Mayor Ward.
No.
Thomas Wright. Bruce Goodson.
No.
Mayor Frank. Mayor Frame.
Yes.
Doug Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Helsel.
No.
Mayor Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mayor Zeidler.
Yes.
Mr. Shepard. Senator John Miller.
No.
Senator Yvonne Miller.
Yes.
Delegate Glenn Oder.
No.
Delegate John Cosgrove. Mr. Towns.
Yes.
Mr. Rickards.
Yes.
Mr. Hewer.
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Mr. Bridges.
Yes.
I believe we make the criteria in your bylaws. Have I left anybody out?
Motion carries.
Was that done?
Mr. Wright?
He called and he said,
I think
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, yes.
I called, I did.
You call. All right, he hasn't
Well,
voted.
let me, Mr. Wright.
No.
Okay.
So what does that mean, Dwight?
It looks in the far right-hand corner, we need 60% of the localities voting yes. Mike, we did have 60, and we went to 54 and a half. Is that the way you guys read it? We don't have enough localities saying yes to take action?
It says.
Where did?
We meet the percentage of representation. We meet the simple majority. We do not. We need 60% of localities voting yes.
All right, well, that's
I could support the amendment if we left 64 on the peninsula in, and I still think that we could verify that that was fiscally constrained by the toll revenue that we could achieve.
well.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I believe that while you haven't called out, it appears that the motion has failed. Now, it does not, I'm prepared to stay here and let's keep, it's not that we don't support the inclusion of the projects. We all want to see these projects in there. We want to see them available for the Tiger funds. There seems to be, I don't mean this as a criticism of staff at all. This stuff is very difficult to understand, and I, for one, am not the brightest bulb in the chandelier, and so maybe it's me that's not getting it. But I mean, I feel like that when I listened to, I can't, my eyesight's bad, I can't see his name, but Mr. Rucker, when I hear him talk about the 5 projects, at one point in the conversation, I was under the impression that we could just add these, leave everything the way it is. If the feds came back and said, by the way, these projects have got to drop out because they're not constrained, they would take our projects out. We wouldn't be voting to take our projects out. And the 6 projects or the 5 projects that would be available for tie grant funds would remain in. And so, given where we are, and with the fact that everybody wants to see this passed, what if we were to just amend the motion, or put another motion on the table and just said we want to add these projects incoming? Right. I'll get the answer here.
Yes, sir.
Can I question Dwight and staff on that last column? Because when you look at it, it says percentage of locality members in attendance and voting. We've got all but 2 localities voting. So I think we've passed the test.
Now you got to have, and I'm not sure if that number, Mike, that number needs to say the far right lower corner should reflect the % of localities voting yes.
But it says attendance.
Well, that's true, not everyone.
That's right. It should be the % of.
Let's do this, because we're by no means done. Can we take a 10-minute break and you all figure this out?
I think we need the answer to that.
We'll get the answer to it.
Let's see if we have the mathematical equation.
Let's take a 10-minute break until 10 of 1. Everybody can get a snack and something to drink. Figure this out. I'm never going to forgive Will Sessoms. Of course, if he was here, we'd probably be done. So. 10-minute meeting will, right? All right.
Madam Chair, we're going to put the motion back up.
Delegate Oder had something he wanted. Delegate Oder, it was my fault at the end of the last round.
Yeah, I actually had asked Mr. Rucker a question.
Yes, I'm sorry, repeat the question.
Yeah, I'll be happy to. And to simplify the question was this, is that if we just add these projects to it, because we know that, or we're going to be applying for Tiger grants to pay for these projects. So if we just add the projects, we add the revenue stream to our existing plan, and it goes to the federal government, would the federal government reject the entire plan, or would they just reject the projects which are no longer fiscally constrained?
Well, we look at the plan as a whole, not a group of projects versus a group of projects. I mean, if your plan is not financially constrained, it's not financially constrained. Our original determination prior to the ruling by the Virginia Supreme Court was that the plan was financially constrained. When the Virginia Supreme Court made its ruling, our original determination did not disappear. It was kept in place. However, we said from this point on, if you want to amend the plan, you have to do something about fiscal constraint. And in this case, what we're seeing is a request to amend the plan. So with the request to amend the plan, it automatically triggers a redetermination of financial constraint, which would cause you to, again, go back and look at your HRTA projects. That's where we're at right now. So our determination is for the plan as a whole.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Farmer?
Madam Chair, I think we may have an agreement with Federal Highways that we could go into the issue of including in our long-range plan a project or projects with preliminary engineering only, as we used to call it, PE only, which heretofore we didn't allow, but I think the Federal Highway Administration would allow that. Question might be whether or not one or all of those HRTA projects remain for now as PE only. That wouldn't jeopardize Southeastern Parkway, which I've been reminded of. The work on I-64, if we were to get it back, it would, even for 264, we're trying to seek money on, would allow us a way out if something happened. So if Federal Highways is okay with the PE only for those HRTA projects that had their tax and fees ruled unconstitutional, maybe we can find some common ground here where we can move on these particular projects.
All right, Mr. Goodson?
I could certainly support putting 64 in for planning and development. I'm sure there's money available for that, for the plan, correct?
I mean, if you've got identified a revenue stream for projects that
I think on
consider PE only, then.
Yeah, and I think on 64, as well as some others, when we're going to Richmond to ask for a reconsideration, there's a reasonable chance that we'll get those funds to get those projects spun back up, at least at that PE phase.
All right, well, I'll ask for Delegate Oder. Can we put the HRPT PE money? I mean, could that be added? I'm just asking.
Haven't identified the PE funding for HRBT yet, not to say we won't. I'm, again, being very upfront and honest with you folks. The PE money for 64 widening on the peninsula, I think, is a possibility, though I won't know until CTV pulls the trigger tomorrow morning.
Madam Chairman, to put
Yes, sir.
something in for PE only, you need to have defined what the project is.
All right, well, so we right now, the motion failed that Mayor Johnson made. Do we have a new motion?
Well, let me say, in accordance with Dennis's definition, for VDOT to do, or its consultant to do preliminary engineering, you have to have a project. I think Southeastern Parkway meets that sniff test, and I-64 widening. Midtown Tunnel we've taken care of. I-64 on a high-rise we have not. 460 has been dropped, but I've been talking with Doug. We're going to try in 2034 resurrect this thing to maybe redefine a project. So that would not, Doug, at this point. So Southeastern, Midtown, and 64 widening, I think we could say legitimately we know what that project was, since you guys had 64 widening underway with a NEPA document. I don't know if I want to stick my neck out any further than that.
All right, so are you suggesting that not all five should stay
That the
in?
ones for PE could clearly, with a straight face, say 64 widening on the peninsula and the Southeastern Parkway and the Midtown Tunnel can certainly meet those criteria for having been fully defined, sufficient to be in the PE stages. And you'd leave those in.
All right, can I get a...
Why didn't you say that?
Is somebody willing to make a motion?
I'm trying to wait and see what's coming up here.
Mr. Goodson?
I mean, I'll make the motion. The motion is add the new projects, maintain the Midtown Tunnel, and include the 3 projects for planning engineering only.
All right.
But let's make sure, let's get it up here before we vote.
Have what we got.
Mayor Krasnoff.
Thank you. I just want to be crystal clear, because obviously we're going through different iterations here, and I just want to make sure that Dominion Boulevard is looked at as an entire project. Is that my understanding, Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right, so Mr. Goodson's made a motion, and Mr. Smith.
I just want to make sure, don't we still have to delete 2 projects?
Still got to delete.
460 and Brain
Oh, do we have to still remove them? Right, good point, good point.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Why could you confirm again that Route 460 is not eligible for?
Well, VDOT has dropped that project.
No, that's not the correct characterization. It has suspended the receipt of detailed proposals.
Okay.
All right, Bruce, do you want to amend your motion to?
I'll amend my motion to what we have up front here. And we got the 3rd crossing needs to be deleted as well, right? That's not up there yet.
That's in there. It's
Third crossing has a record of decision.
Okay, so we can P&E on 3rd crossing, good.
And I don't know that Doug got an answer, a good answer to his question on 460. If you just suspended the public-private
We suspended receiving detailed proposals.
Is the project active with VDOT right now? In the 6-year program?
It's still in the 6-year program.
Then we don't need to delete that, it can still stay in the PE only part then.
All right, and for purpose of clarification, Mr. Goodson, are you stopping at approved acceleration, or is that included?
Oh, that's included, yeah.
It's included, the approved acceleration part.
Yes.
Okay, so the whole slide.
Gary, there we go.
Yeah, I think we got it.
Yeah, last time it was 2 motions, but you want to make one motion for the whole slide?
Let's pick one motion, get this thing done.
All right. All right.
Is that what you wanted 2 motions?
No, I'm good with this.
Okay, so we got one motion, it's the whole slide. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right.
Discussion?
Yes, sir.
Just for clarification, because since I've been here now the last 3 or 4 months, we haven't brought up any discussion about the third crossing. I just want to clarify, it's stating us publicly, that the reason the third crossing is in there is because it is a previous project which is developed to a certain point, and there's no need to take it out right now. But as I see, this to me, I'll just explain this to the reporter. In my mind, this is a new group. This is a new process. This is us maturing as a transportation planning organization. And I see our list of projects, and I see the effort that we bring forth maturing as well. And so I see this as a process right now that we're going through, and I'm grateful to be part of it.
All right, thank you. All right, let's go ahead and take the roll.
Do we want to do a roll call? If we have unanimous, we don't need a roll call.
Well, do a roll call.
Do a roll call. Clear me up here, Mike. Let me remove these before we... And oh, by the way, while he's doing this, in the bylaws, the criteria for percent of localities is those present and voting. Whereas the percent of population is percent of population for the whole region, whether you're voting or not. You still got to get 66%. The 60% criteria in the bylaws is for those localities present and voting. That's why I saw 60% for Isle of Wight voting. Then when they voted, it dropped down. I don't know if that makes sense for everybody. So Mike, Mayor Krasnoff.
Yes.
Christian Riley. No. Mayor Ward.
Yes.
Tom Wright.
Yes.
Bruce Goodson.
Yes.
Mayor Frank. Mayor Frame.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Helson.
Yes.
Mayor Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Mayor Zeidler.
Yes.
And Mr. Shepherd. Senator John Miller.
Yes.
Senator Yvonne Miller.
Yes.
Delegate Glenn Oder.
Yes.
Delegate John Cosgrove. Michael Towns.
Yes.
Mr. Rickards.
Yes.
Mr. Huard.
Yes.
Mr. Hill.
Yes.
Jerry Bridges.
Yes.
It was that snack break that was fantastic. All right, thank you very, very much, everybody. All right. Now, Doug.
All right.
Nominating committee.
Okay, I'll get, the staff I think is going to put a couple of slides up, one in particular, but I'll give a report on the nominating committee for the Citizen Advisory Committee. What we're going to do is, I'm going to go over the criteria for you, give you the list of names that we've come up with, and then give you some next steps of ways to continue to enhance that list. You'll remember back in weeks ago, we agreed we'd have a couple of meetings. We agreed that the criteria for membership would be that the members would reside in one of the jurisdictions, obviously in Hampton Roads, have an interest in regional transportation planning process, have an interest in promoting public involvement in community outreach and transportation planning for the region, have time to review the pertinent materials and attend and actively participate. In the last meeting with some conversation we started by Senator Miller, we said that the group should remind everyone that it should appropriately reflect the diversity of our region. So the names we're going to give you, the committee met, finalized 24 names, gave me the prerogative as chair to try to add a couple of names from the floor today to continue to get our numbers in terms of diversity where they need to be. If I need to walk through the names specifically, I will. We're going to leave 5 slots unfilled. We still need a person from Poquoson. We still need a person from James City County. Frankly, we need more females on the group. and we need more folks age 18 to 34. But we've done well in terms of the other criteria, in terms of matching the demographics of the region. So with that said, this is the list of names that we're putting forward. 24 of them were approved by the committee. Kirsten Tinch is the one that I've added to the list since that meeting and would put forward today. So a majority of the committee would ask that you approve these 25 names today with the one that I have added, and then the committee gave me the prerogative to work with staff to do the staggered terms, and we've simply, if you remember, we're going to do 1-, 2-, and 3-year terms, and just to get out of any kind of inconsistency, we simply put them in alphabetical order by city and made 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, right in that kind of right in that order. The committee would bring back to you in January 5 additional names, again to bring the mix of male and female more in line with the region, and to bring get some more young folks on that list. And Senator Miller and I were chatting beforehand. That 18 to 34 crowd it's tough to get their attention in something like this. They're kind of getting on with life and getting started, and we need to work hard to get some of them. We've got a few, but frankly, we only had a couple of applicants. That's the recommendation from the committee, and we'd certainly welcome any questions.
Yes, sir.
I was asked specifically, why is Chesapeake only have 2? I mean, there must be a reason why.
But we had real limited applications. We had literally 3 applications, as you and I chatted a little bit before the last meeting, and didn't get any more in. So we put 2. I'm sorry.
We put the slide up. We have targets based on proportion of population. I think 2 was the target, Mayor Krasnoff, for Chesapeake.
One of the things, again, was asked of me, as you can see, questions posed to me was how come it wasn't 4? Is it just because of lack of response? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I think what we're saying, 2 things. One, we were not trying, we had talked in here that we wanted geographic diversity, but we were not going to necessarily get into specific numbers from specific communities, although we, as I will say, as a committee, we laid the population grid out there and said, let's make sure we have, no offense to Gordon, that we didn't have 8 people from Pocosin and 1 from Virginia Beach. So we wanted to have an appropriate balance. Frankly, on population, I forgot what the number for Chesapeake could be around. I think could be 3, as many as 3, and we've still got 5 slots. So if you've got somebody, particularly female, that you'd like to put forward between now and January, we'd certainly be pleased to try to make that work.
Certainly, unless it's just like dealing with the numbers, you can see we're at 220, we're probably more than that actually, but 220,000, so just for consideration.
Yeah, but frankly, to the degree that you can drum up some interest, that'd be helpful.
Thank you.
The other thing to keep in mind is about 1/3 of these terms will be for a year. So to the degree that we think we didn't get the numbers right, we'll have the opportunity to make some shifts at the end of the year. But we think that between now and the January meeting, we can get that additional 5 slots and give the appropriate demographic mix.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Can they go back to the name slide?
Pardon me?
Can they? Thank you.
Yes.
I think we need a motion.
And you've got, by the way, you've got all this, and Brenda, you've got all this at your spot. You've got a sheet that gives all this information and also gives a demographic backup. So the motion that I would make is that we approve these 25 names today, holding the 5 that we'll bring back in January and with these terms.
Well, I guess I'll just wait for the second and the discussion.
All right. Can I get a second on Mr. Smith's motion to approve this list? Mr. Hewer? Okay, Mr. Odom.
I'm looking at the agenda item number 10, and it says at the December 9th meeting, the nominating committee reviewed applications, yada yada. It was anticipated the nominating committee would request board approval at the final slate in January. I mean, I'm seeing this basically for the first time and thinking, okay, there's things here I'm not sure that I understand, and so rather than take everybody's time up here, I thought that that would be the time that we would use to discuss, not necessarily lobby, but discuss to find out more information as to why the names are the way they are in our locality. So I was prepared today just to see this and think, okay, great, we'll spend more time on it, but it'll actually be January 2010 before we vote on it.
That's a really good point. I mean, I see your points.
And so that was, and this was also what was advertised. So I would make a substitute motion that this would be postponed to the January 2010 meeting.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, and Mr. Hewer, I know, you're opposed? All right, thank you. I know you need to get to the meeting this afternoon, right? So you want to go ahead and, can we move up your new business?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I wanted to do under old business or new business, however, back when we approved all the projects for the Hampton Roads region, we dispersed it around all of the municipalities around here. We're now at the point where we've got $42 million in our money out there. The Commonwealth cannot fail to obligate that money. It's a team effort, your individual municipalities, the MPO, and VDOT. So we're here to help you if you need it. But if you cannot meet the federal obligation for that hour money, please step up now and say that you can't. Because there's an opportunity for the MPO to allocate that to another municipality so we do not lose the money. And then generally that may require a STIP or a TIP amendment, which means we'd have to do that at the January meeting. So I've given those of you involved a letter, so we can't wait till January to say, I'm not going to meet my obligation to get that project developed. So what I'm asking is, each one of you around the table, I'm asking your personal involvement to review with your staff where they are in that process. The absolute deadlines are January 9th is a 90% submittal. So if you haven't started on that project now, I think it will be rare over the Christmas holidays for you to be making a 90% submittal. February 2nd is the final submission date, and March 2nd is the final obligation. So it's not something we can wait till the February meeting and say, oh, I've got a substitute project, because if it's not in the STIP, it's not in the TIP, it's going to fail, and we cannot fail in the Commonwealth to obligate our money.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. All right, that brings us to...
Madam Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I just want to reinforce what Dennis said. I think there's some communities that may have been quiet about whether they can spend their money or not. And I don't know if Dwight wants to maybe informally scrub that a little bit, because I think there might be some embarrassment if we don't watch it.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver.
Dennis, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Ritter.
I was just wanting to know for the AIR projects. And I brought this up at the TAC meeting. Is there a way where maybe perhaps the MPO and the state can work together, or perhaps even the CTB, to perhaps maybe streamline this process of moving AIR-funded projects forward? And the example I'm going to give is the MPO approved, I guess, a list of AIR projects in January. And really the only thing that's required when you think about it in order to authorize federal projects is the MPO, the state approve it, and the project be in the TIP or the STIP. TIP or the STIP is the authorizing document, is the only authorizing document that allows an organization to move forward with the funding of the project. But once the MPO approved its AIR projects, we kind of sort of had to wait kind of sort of 7, 8 months for, at the state level, reviewed by the Commonwealth Transportation Board to review those projects. And then after that review, to include those projects in the federal authorization document. Maybe I'm confused.
All I can say at this point is we are where we are.
Okay.
We've got a short deadline. I just need your personal involvement.
Okay. I just appreciate it. If there's future errors.
That's a conversation for another day.
Okay. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. All right, let's move to item number 11.
Have a slide.
I'm going to take you through this. If everybody's in a very cooperative mood here, I think we can really go through this pretty quickly and have a positive outcome. On with that preparatory comments, on December 4th, Federal Railroad and VDOT, or BDRPT, published, not EPA, but these folks published the Hampton Roads, the Richmond to Hampton Roads Passenger Rail Draft Tier 1 Environmental Statement, EIS. Public comments were, on the next slide, December 21st to February 12th. Public hearing dates, we didn't realize this until about a week or two ago. They've been set, so take note. There is one in Norfolk, January 28th at the Half Moon Cruise and Celebration Center from 5:30 to 8. We may as well be up front. There are a number of technical issues that have been expressed, including but not limited to the travel demand forecasting based on some major components of the region's long-range plan that may or may not make it in the foreseeable future. The draft Tier 1 EIS assumed that the cost, now this is almost a quote on the second bullet, and I've taken liberty to put this in front of you folks. I think it's very important. I think in two places, but particularly strongly in one, the document in the executive summary says that the draft Tier 1 EIS assumes that the costs associated with capital improvements between Richmond and Petersburg will be associated with the Southeast High-Speed Rail corridor, unless that corridor is deferred or canceled, and I don't think that is the case. So I agree with the City of Norfolk that if that's in the document as the plain and simple assumption, then those costs associated should, with going from Richmond to Petersburg, ought to be a part of the Southeast High-Speed Rail corridor. We're going to have to work through that in this document. I don't need to read what I have on this next slide. You all took huge action to set your long-term position. They are restated here for high-speed rail and intercity passenger rail. Next slide. It's the staff's recommendation to concurrently fully utilize the TTAC, that's your technical folks, your Transportation Advisory Committee, that's your managers and stakeholders, and the board, to craft comments regarding the draft Tier 1 EIS. I can assure you, Mayor Krasnoff, I am not going to generate MPO staff comments only and march to Richmond with them. So I will be asking, as of today, formal comments from us to be viewed collectively, and I will definitely deliver them with all vigor. Focus on the region's full attention on furthering its competitiveness, as we've stated before, for federal and state high-speed rail and intercity passenger rail funding. So that means for both the South Side connection and the Peninsula connection. And have, and this is maybe a new one for some of you folks, have the region pursue interim funding to improve on-time performance and frequency of Amtrak service along the CSX line between Richmond, Williamsburg, and Newport News, and that's extended down to the new location if we can get that. And establish passenger rail service along the Norfolk Southern line between Petersburg, Suffolk, and Norfolk. And expand light rail transit service to Virginia Beach, Norfolk Naval Station, and Norfolk International Airport. On the next slide. Public comments will be incorporated. Both TPO board comments and public comments will be incorporated into future versions of the EIS. I think it will be fair to say it's a living document. I think it's very important on this last bullet that we not get bogged down on the technical issues that I think we're going to address, but rather still continue to express a unified voice so that we can bring this consultant on board and we can be very competitive and get future federal and state funds to do both of those corridor improvements. Madam Chair, that concludes my remarks, and I'd recommend that we move forward as recommended here, and we develop those set of comments through your TTAC, possibly your TAC, and we'll come back to the board with our comments on that draft EIS, and then move on these other things as I've outlined here.
We don't need to take any action. We've already passed a resolution.
I think yeah, you passed a resolution on October 30th meeting, but I think I ought to get some indication there's a consensus that staff is in fact recommending you in a direction that you can endorse and you're ready to go with. Because there are.
All right, thank you. A second?
Second.
All right, everyone in favor? All in favor? Anybody opposed? All right, thank you. Number 12.
Item 12 can be dropped. I got word late yesterday from Danny Plugger with Virginia for High-Speed Rail that we have a $2.5 billion bill. Didn't get the $4 billion, but we got more than the $1.5 billion. So he thinks it's a really good start, and we do not need to take action. The bill is waiting for the president's signature. He is asking that he be able to come back and continue to help us move forward with some future funding for high-speed rail and intercity passenger rail.
All right, number 13.
Number 13, because of the hour of the day, I'm going to suggest that what you do here, rather than go through the presentation from Mr. Gonzalez, that you see the attachments you have here and that you approve this public participation plan that has been given to you in the agenda packet, and approve the environmental justice guidelines and approve the resolution adopting the public participation plan. Through this reform process, we have vigorously and aggressively gone through the development of all of these documents. So I personally think it's ready for prime time now. So we need to take the recommended actions to approve the public participation plan for distribution and that resolution adopting it, and approve the environmental justice guidelines and limited English proficiency program for distribution. That will wrap us up, I believe.
Okay, so we need
I move the approval of the resolution and plan.
All right, thank you. Mr. Gibson, thank you.
Make one quick comment.
Yes, sir.
I think, and I think it's probably old habit, but I'd like to see, as we're doing things like this that are really changing how we do business, and I think that this participation plan does that. You know, a lot of times we do the non-driver mobility studies and whatnot, we send them out. I think these kinds of things should be for distribution and implementation. I mean, it's a little bit of semantics, but I think it starts to say this is important. Absolutely. And we're directing the staff to do this.
Absolutely. Good point.
Right. I accept the amendment.
Thank you.
The motion.
That's right. That's an amendment, by the way.
Oh, it's amendment. Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Okay. All right. All in favor? Anyone opposed? All right. Brings us to item number 14.
Well, we have some slides here. I can give you a short version or a little bit of a longer version. I think what is important here is in your attachment here are planning priorities for fiscal year 2011. I can't understate the importance of a UPWP. I think, Mr. Smith, you brought it up. You wanted to be fully engaged early on. This item was our response to your request, item number 14, to get you involved early. I think we already had a great discussion earlier this morning based on us trying to amend the plan about doing feasibility studies, giving us staff direction as to the kind of things you want to do. I want to let you know internally, I and Dr. Ravenbach are restructuring staff to be responsive to the things you want to do, and not just, excuse me for saying this, Ivan, but I think you would agree, not just doing the federal regulatory things. So we're going to restructure internally. When we have this February 10th retreat, we're going to put some strong things on the table. We want you to bring some strong things to the table and understand, as Mr. Smith has said, that UPWP is your template for where you want to go and where you want the staff to go to support you in that. So that's an important document, just like doing an implementation document called a TIP. So that's my shortened version, but be prepared to discuss some very thought-provoking things for that UPWP.
Comment? Yesterday I heard a very provocative panel that Mr. Farmer, Senator Miller, Phil Schuchette, Don Goldberg, and Pierce Homer were a part of. And it got said without much contradiction that the Midtown Tunnel was the litmus test for the TPO to get something done, that it was ready. Everybody keeps talking about let's prioritize, let's prioritize. But when you think of the Midtown Tunnel, there's $400 or $500 million that the state has not yet put up. There's a huge set of toll issues. I would like to suggest that between today and the retreat, very serious consideration be given to how the MPO is going to start now addressing the Midtown Tunnel so that it can really be ready when the VDOT and everybody else are ready, because it seems to me there are huge tolling questions in there that may have regional application that ought to get addressed, you know, rather than just wait for one day it shows up on this agenda. So I took that set of comments yesterday very seriously and would think the MPO ought to be kind of called into action.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
If I could just, Mr. Oliver, yes, I did some research on this yesterday afternoon by having some conversations with people, because it was the first time that I had heard the number of $400 to $600 million is what was needed in order to make that project work. And my frustration was, if that's what the nut is we have to crack, then why am I just hearing about it now? What I found from people, even people who were very close to the whole submission, said that was the first time they hadn't heard that number. So I certainly don't mean to suggest that it was misinformation, but the information on these proposals has got to be clear so that we all know what it is, we as legislators and we as elected officials know what in the world what nut is we're trying to crack. My frustration was far worse by the end of the day than it was by the beginning of the day on that particular issue. But I am very committed to the Midtown Tunnel. If that project's ready to go, let's find a way to build it.
Well, let me...
Senator Miller?
I'd like to add that the thing that we really have to understand is that the longer we take to decide on a project, the more expensive the project will be. So I think Mr. Oliver is asking us to do something in terms of being exactly ready, and so we don't delay it. Because if we delay it, it's going to cost even more than the figure you heard yesterday. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I don't know what you were going to say.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mayor Frank.
I appreciate those comments. Quite frankly, it's the first time I've heard those figures. But what our concern is that this is not, we're not talking about constructing the tunnel or the improvements at the downtown tunnel. There are costs being added onto this project that VDOT over the course of decades has paid for themselves. Operation and maintenance, numbers of, the safety issues. I mean, they are basically walking away from I won't say walking away from the Midtown Tunnel, but they're going to say, we're going to put all this money in, here are the tolls, and now you guys are going to have to run this thing. And so there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot really to burrow down in. This project could still get built. Had a presentation Monday from the private partner. They could be under construction in 16 months. That's how close they are. But we still have got to burrow down to see where these additional funds that keep getting added onto a project that around this room, we studied this project a few years ago. We concluded it could be built for a 65, 75 cent toll and actually spin off excess money. Other things got dropped into the project. I understand that it's probably a better project. The MLK got widened and things like that the federal highway guys require for safety reasons. But there's a lot of work to do here to bring that number down.
All right, anybody else?
Well, so where do we go? So I think Mr. Oliver's saying let's have some discussion of this thing in January or February or whatever that is, but what is that?
The retreat could be your first attempt ever to proactively craft a work program that aggressively attacks those things that you think threaten project viability. And I think it was brought up yesterday, those things cost real money. And I think we've sort of been sitting on the side, and I think it's time to not sit on the side and jump in the middle and eliminate those things that are costing us money and time.
Well, the observation I would make is not unlike high-speed rail. We're probably the most informed people in the region on transportation, and yet we all have a different understanding of what the numbers, what's in these projects and what isn't in these projects, and maybe that's the broader retreat conversation. How do we get our arms around this stuff? But specifically on the Midtown Tunnel, what are the numbers?
This is a Public-Private Transportation Act proposal, so there is some negotiation going on between the parties that are not out here in the public, and that's probably part of the frustration.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Since I think that's it. Anybody else have anything to?
Yeah, I'd like to say I thought you ran a great meeting.
Oh, bless you. All right, thank you very much.
Are you going to come back?